Anindita, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was speaking in mute. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fifth webinar in the Transport Learning series. This webinar is to understand how Battery Aadhaar could enable greater traceability, regulatory compliance, transparency, and circularity across India's battery value chain. Today's call will be led by Anubhav Mishra, Consultant Electric Mobility WRI India, and Dr. Parveen Kumar, Program Head, Sustainable Batteries WRI India. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. I think we can start. Over to you, Anubhav.
Yeah, thanks, Anindita. Before I begin, I encourage everybody to post questions in the chat section, Q&A section. So please do go ahead, and at the end of my presentation, I and with Dr. Parveen will try to take as many questions as possible. Yeah. So with that, let's begin. And I would like to begin by quickly, drawing your attention to very recent news. One is just of the last week. So US exports about 30 to 35,000 metric tons of electronic waste every month. Just last week, the US administration signed an order banning all of that. So 33,000 metric tons of electronic waste, which includes battery waste, is off the market, right? Second news. The second news is just a month old, where the country that dominates 70 to 90% of the global rare earth and critical minerals refining capacity, that banned exports of rare earth materials to 14 EU companies. Now, these are the companies that are involved in critical, refining and rare earth material extraction in Europe, including the largest defense contractor of Germany. Suddenly, the entire feedstock has stopped, right? Now, why did I start with these two news? I'll just come to it in like one or two slides. So let me quickly share the presentation. Yeah. So let me quickly jump on. So I don't need to stress about how the energy carbonization, and transport decarbonization is important for India, right? But what's the takeaway from that? What's happening in India? The takeaway is that India is going to see a massive demand of lithium batteries. Now, that's not what the problem is. The problem really is we don't have the raw materials to manufacture these many batteries. We are ending up importing almost 100% of a lithium, nickel, cobalt. Okay. Uh, and this is where the news that I just started with comes in. Basically, the larger message is that our ambitious decarbonization goals, India's goals, is kind of vulnerable, right? This problem needs to be solved. So, of course, the most logical solution that comes to our head is battery circularity. Now, what do I mean by that? Essentially, two things. One is you recycle. So whatever material that we have already imported or that's there in the country, sort of recycle, get it to the recycler. The recyclers extract the valuable minerals and then send these minerals to the domestic battery manufacturers. Or method number two is we try to extend the life of the resource itself, right? Which is essentially called battery repurposing or refurbishing. So we are trying to extend the life of the battery and the materials thereof. Now, of course, circularity brings in a lot of benefits. But the important point here is just look at the market potential of the circularity. Almost 130 gigawatt of lithium ion battery waste is going to be generated just in India in just a couple of years, right? So that's immense amount of potential that's sitting right here with us. So what do we do? Circularity. But again, circularity is a solution, but it brings along a lot of associated problems with it, right? It's not easy to implement battery circularity. There's a lot of the reverse logistics. That is how the battery, once retired, flows into to a recycler or refurbisher, then it flows to a battery manufacturer. It's very fragmented right now in India, and there's a lot of leakage of the resources into the informal system. It brings down the efficiency. There's a lot of material loss in the process. Now, because of these inefficiencies, the eventual output of the recycling and the refurbishing industry drops down. Just as an example, a refurbisher or the recycler, whenever they receive battery, they have to do the sorting, they have to set up their own testing systems to test these batteries, which can be reused, which cannot be reused. This takes up a lot of time, this takes up a lot of money, this takes up a lot of effort, right? The problem that there's no formalized system also leads to another problem, which is that whenever a retired battery is sold, how do you value a retired battery? So in today's world, essentially these batteries are sold at scrap value, which may be like 10-12% of the original cost. But when a EV battery retires, it still holds about 80% of its original capacity. That 80% of capacity is being sold at scrap value. And finally, India has been taking up measures to address these problems, but the problem, another problem that arises out of it is how do you verify the data that's actually being fed to the regulators, right? So these are some of the problems that are making battery circularity difficult to implement in India. All of these areas are, a huge study in, areas of study in themselves. But if I zoom out, right? If I zoom out and look at it from a higher sort of an elevation, I understand that at present scenario, I don't know at a country level how many batteries are coming in, where are these, what chemistry are of these batteries, where these chemistry batteries are going to, in which industry they are being used, how has been their performance. Once retired, how do they actually flow to a recycler or a refurbisher? How much of material is exactly extracted from each of these batteries? How is it flowing to a battery manufacturer? Essentially, the problem I'm trying to define here is India lacks a national scale and, very importantly, verifiable battery data management framework. Now, this is the problem. What's the solution? The solution that we've come to understand is Battery Aadhaar. Now, what is Battery Aadhaar? Battery Aadhaar essentially means you start giving every battery a digital identity, right? Similar to how Aadhaar solved a lot of problems for us, right? So once each of us had a digital identity, then it sort of opened up a lot of use cases. And similar vision is being drawn for every battery because it is one of the most critical assets for India at this point of time, right? So let me simplify this battery Aadhaar. So let us understand battery Aadhaar as a combination of two documents, right? One is Aadhaar. Now, what does Aadhaar store? It essentially stores your static data, like what's your name, what's your father's name, what's the date of birth, and so on, what's your permanent address, and so on and so forth. Plus a passport. Why a passport? Because a passport essentially stores when and where are you moving across borders, right? So when you combine both of these information, that's what you get in the form of a battery Aadhaar. That's the vision. Now, what do you do with this? Once you have both of these data collected digitally and universally accessible, you start then sharing this data, right? And of course, you can't just randomly put it out there. Based on the role that you play in the value chain, you will be getting access to specific parts of the information that's stored against battery Aadhaar. You may be a recycler, you may be a financier, you may be a warranty service provider, you may be battery as a service provider. So depending on the role that you play in the ecosystem, you get access to that data, and of course you build, whatever value on top of it. This is a very simplified version of what a battery Aadhaar essentially is. Now, this is just one example, right? If we start diving deeper into this entire ecosystem, we start appreciating the value that data can generate, right? In this entire sort of in this sector. But I don't want to get into individual benefits. What's the takeaway from this message, from this slide? My takeaway from this slide is that we see that if data is recorded, it's stored, and is made accessible for exchange between the ecosystem players, the benefits that you can be derived not only support a circular ecosystem, but actually a lot of benefits also impact the first life, improving the experience, improving the asset efficiency in its first life. So this is the entire universe of value that data can unlock. And this is not restricted to just the EV ecosystem. It can unlock whole lot of, value added services like battery as a service, battery financing, data-based, data analytics services, charging infrastructure, the energy sector, and so on and so forth, right? So this is the value that data can unlock. Now, let me try to be more concrete here, because I don't want to be more superficial and leave this at a very superficial level. Let's take a very specific example of how battery data can flow between various ecosystem players. Now, let's start with sort of three players in the value chain: the battery OEM, the EV OEM, and the EV consumer. Okay. And EV OEM is the guy who is responsible for maintaining the battery Aadhaar. Now, we'll do two things. One is understand how the battery moves, and two, as the battery moves, how the data is moving with the battery, right? So once the battery OEM sells the battery to an EV OEM, right, the sales data is updated and it shares certain amount of data, like when was it manufactured, what's the material composition, what was the carbon footprint of the manufacturing, how much of recycled content was used, and so on and so forth. Now, when the EV OEM sells the car to a consumer, and the consumer starts using the battery or starts using the car, it generates a lot of real-time operational data, right? How the battery is behaving, what are the temperature changes, what are the service records, how many cycles, charges, discharge cycles the battery is going through, and so on and so forth. Now, all of that data can also feed into this repository. Now, let's say the battery is retired, the car is retired, the battery flows back to the EV OEM. Now, EV OEM has a decision to make: either send the battery to a recycler or send it to a refurbisher. Now, based on the information that's been collected, the entity may be the EV OEM or a recycler, can do analysis of the first life data that's been captured in the Aadhaar, make a more informed decision that whether the battery or module or some of the cells are fit enough for a secondary use or not. If they are not, these are to be sent to be recycled. If some of these cells are in very good health, they can be extracted for refurbishing of the battery, right? If the battery flows to a recycler, the recycler generates the required data. How much of it, what's the recycled, what's the recovery from the battery, when was it collected, where was it recycled. So the traceability is ensured of the entire battery's life cycle. And if the battery is refurbished, it sort of takes on a new Aadhaar number, the battery Aadhaar number. The status that it has been refurbished feeds into the original battery Aadhaar, and the battery Aadhaar cycle is done, right? So this is how battery data can actually flow between the consumers. Uh, just a small example, how even say an insurance or a asset or a project financier, which is basically insuring or financing battery based assets, say a storage system or a fleet operator. Now, one of the problems that we have understood is that they don't have confidence on how the batteries will behave. Now, if there is a certain amount of real time data or operational data or the health data is made accessible to financial, it might unlock better risk management, better claim management, better financial solutions that can be developed, and it helps the overall ecosystem to grow. Now, these are two examples. What's happening globally on battery data? There are countries now working on battery data, but I would say that one of the most matured sort of ecosystem when it comes to battery data management is, of course, the European Union. Why? Just because they have been working on it since a couple of years before. So the European regulation came out in 2023, sorry. And it said that every battery greater than 2 kilowatt hour has to mandatorily have a battery passport by 2027, right? So the European regulation came out with about close to about 100, 120 data attributes that need to be fed into the battery passport. It also came out with extensive requirements as to what data needs to be there, uh, who are your suppliers, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 supplier data, where are the minerals that are used in the battery coming from, are these minerals being sourced from risk economies. So, so essentially, one of the use cases that European Union is looking at is the ethical sourcing as a use case, right? Um, European Union has been sort of, they are going ahead with the mandatory battery passport requirement. As so, every battery sold in Europe from February 2027 onwards will have to have this. Um, uh, I mean, there are a host of organizations working in Europe to develop this concept. There is European Union's own technical committee. There is a Global Battery Alliance. There is, Catena X, which is an industry organization developing these principles, so on and so forth. Now, China, very interestingly, actually has been tracing its batteries since way back in 2019. Right. So 2018. So they established a centralized portal wherein every time a battery moves, that is from a producer to a consumer to a say a recycler or a refurbisher, every time it needs to be logged onto the central system. So China has been tracing its batteries since many years now. On top of that, China has been developing what they're calling as the China Battery ID plan, which is a data management framework. It is more it's been developed more to sort of comply with the European Union's regulation. Uh, it is also a decentralized sort of a system where data is stored in a decentralized manner, but specific amount of data is to be fed to the centralized government control servers. So China has been very active on this. Now there are other countries also. I think probably amongst the countries mentioned here on the slide, Japan has been pretty active. Um, they also have a Urano system, and a lot of Japanese companies have been tying up with European players, testing out the battery passport solutions. Um, uh, and a lot of it is actually driven by, trying to be compliant with Europe's mandate, which kicks in a couple of months from today, actually. Now, what has been India doing? India has also been sort of slowly working towards managing its batteries. India's battery waste management rules came in 2020-22 and sort of brought in the producer responsibilities, that essentially said that every producer or the one who sells batteries needs to ensure that those batteries are collected and recycled or refurbished, right? So it tried to establish a traceable system where recyclers, when they recycle the battery, they generate certain certificates, EPR certificates. The producers are supposed to buy those certificates to show their compliance. In 2025, the Indian government came out with an amendment to BWMR and they established the concept of a QR code. Although this QR code only talked about the EPR registration number. So the QR code just needs to show the registration number. So as of today, every recycler or a battery OEM or a refurbisher needs to officially register on CBCB platform online. They get an EPR registration number, and that needs to be mandatorily shown on each of the batteries. Building on top of that, last year, MOT came out with a draft guidelines for Battery Aadhaar, right? So let's jump into what the Battery Aadhaar system is. So it is essentially, let me see if I can change to a pointer. Arrow option, is there a pointer? Okay, I don't see for some reason. Yeah, laser pointer. Okay. So essentially, it is a three-layered architecture system that it's a draft. Let me be very clear with it. It is a system that is still evolving. The government is still taking feedbacks on this. So let's not claim that this is something which is, is concrete and it's already out there as a rule. This is a draft development by the government. It is essentially a three-layered architecture that they have proposed. One is alphanumeric, which is a 21 code alphanumeric system, which represents each of the letters sort of represents a certain data point. Then the next level is a QR code. So if there are about 10 data attributes, which will be 21, say 10 to 11 data attributes, which will be represented through the alphanumeric code. The next will be sort of the next set of 15 data attributes will be covered through the QR code. Now, the third layer is actually very interesting, where the government in the draft guidelines have said that the dynamic data parameters will actually will have to be uploaded on a centralized government server. This is where it sort of deviates from the European system. Uh, why Indian government has done that? It is because the India's electric mobility ecosystem is very different from the European system, right? Because whatever EV penetration that has happened in India is largely has been in the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler segments, which is extremely price sensitive. So the government feels that to bring down the cost of this technology, let government bear the cost. So let there be a central government server. So any small player can just keep uploading data onto the central government server, and it doesn't have to sort of bear the additional cost of storing that data. So this is essentially one of the most critical items where it's different from the global framework that's been developing. From a scope perspective, every battery greater than 2 kilowatt hour has been covered under the system. Um Right now, this is more attuned to an EV ecosystem because, as the document says, the government feels that in today's India, 80 to 90% of battery is being driven by the EV ecosystem. So let's just let the phase one first bring in the EV ecosystem to comply with the battery Aadhaar system, and then eventually it will develop into the other industrial battery ecosystem. Uh, so this is how sort of it looks like, right? This is the 21-digit alphanumeric code, what the government has proposed, where the letters kind of represent certain data parameters, right? On top of that, this will be a QR code, and on top of that will be the central government server. Other than this, there have been sort of no kind of direction as to when this will be mandated, when this will be introduced, because it is still a system under development. So now, what has WRI India been doing? So we have been working on Battery Aadhaar since the last probably 1.5 to 2 years now. So what's the role that we are sort of seeing for ourselves? Since beginning, we have been trying to gather evidences from the ecosystem, right? And capture the insights, capture the evidence, talking to the ecosystem players, and seeing if the insights that we gather through research work, you know, this research sort of help inform the larger battery, Aadhaar policy. So this is a picture of last year's Battery Summit, where WR India came in as a consortium with some of industry players, big names. We launched a Battery Aadhaar prototype. This was launched by the Honorable Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Jitendra Singh, in the Battery Summit. This prototype actually helped initiate, a lot of conversations on Battery Aadhaar. We did webinars, we did roundtables, right? So all of these have been feeding into the evidence collection that we've been doing at WRI India. All of these has also been sort of captured in some of the research publications. This is one of the publication. This is actually a conference proceeding of the December 2024 roundtable that WRI India did. I request Anandita to share the links in the chat so that people can use it. Also, you can also scan the QR code to access this document. Um, this is the expert note that was recently published by WRI India. Dr. Praveen is one of the authors. Please use the QR code to access this document. Anandita will also be sharing the links in the chat. Now, beyond this, one of the ways in which we have been trying to sort of, or rather, I would say that the approach that WR India has been taking towards Battery Aadhaar is of co-creation or co-development, right? So under Battery 360, which is a 100+ member strong alliance of players across India's battery ecosystem, a working group was created focusing entirely on Battery Aadhaar. This working group is being led by or anchored by WRI India. And under this working group, we sort of reached out to more than 40 organizations, vehicle OEMs, battery OEMs, technology service providers, recyclers, refurbishers, right? The first thing that we did is we sort of tried to understand what is the paths that this policy can take in India, right? So we started with phase one, which is really to understand why does India even need a battery Aadhaar? What is its value proposition? I mean, from a distance, yeah, we see that as I started my presentation with, we need to harness the power of data. But when I actually dive deeper into this question, a lot of challenges come up, right? Who exactly is going to use this data? Where is the value proposition? So we started as a working group, trying to answer this question. Uh, why does India even need a battery Aadhaar? What is the value proposition, right? Uh, we started with that. Phase two is we think that why don't we start identifying who are the various stakeholders involved, what are the roles and responsibilities that various of many of these players can play. Um, let's work on the digital architecture development. So, from a technology perspective, how this will look. Why don't we do pilots and finally can all of this inform the development of a policy? So under this working group, to arrive at defining the value proposition, we conducted more than sort of 12. This the 12 that I've noted down. There were more than 12 stakeholder consultations. We did convenings. We did focus group discussions. We individually talked to recyclers, refurbishers, battery OEMs, technology service providers, and at the end of it, we could finally. So, how the approach that was taken was we sort of ask these players what are currently your pain points when it comes to data, right? So you list down your pain points, then let us know what are the benefits that you see, that you can sort of you can see if you get the data that you are asking for, right? These are the kind of players that we engaged with. But this is where I want to draw your attention to. So we ended up identifying 12 use cases, which we bucketed under 5 larger themes, right? So, for example, traceability is one of the use cases. So, and we tried to simplify this in a way that every use case should answer one very simple question. Now, what do I mean by that? Under circular economy, reuse versus recycle decision making, the question this is trying to answer is, can battery data be beneficial in making a more efficient reuse versus recycle decision? So when a recycler receives a battery, can the first life data be used to make better decisions whether this battery is completely sort of it's not good for anything else, it needs to be recycled, or it needs to be refurbished? That's the question this is answering. And similarly, we sort of try to um, you know pain points that were identified, we then sort of re-engineered them to understand if these can be simplified into very simple problem statements. And these are the 12 problem statements that we came out with. Again, can data, for example, under circular economy, can data be used for improving the efficiency of refurbishment? Or let's say under consumer protection, can data be used to improve the warranty claims, right? Um, or let's take for example this, can data be used to ensure that the cells that are being imported today are of the best quality and there is no dumping of cheap quality of cells, right? So these are the kind of very specific questions that we arrived at, and we sort of consolidated them into 12 use cases bucketed under 5 larger themes. So once we asked the players that what are the benefits, we then ask them, okay, now that you've identified the pain points, what are the specific data points that you need to address those pain points, right? So we did this exercise and eventually the entire group came up with almost 30 to 35 data attributes. And then what we did was we took this 34 data attributes and we mapped against each of the use cases. So, for example, one use case will need five data points. Another use case will need 10 data points, so on and so forth. Along this, we also, took advantage of the platform and asked all of these people that if Battery Aadhaar is implemented, what are the kind of challenges that you're seeing? So, we kind of again bucketed these challenges under these 5 buckets. So standardization is a problem, right? There is no standardized data expect protocols. The kind of VMS data that's collected by various OEMs is completely different. So how do you ensure there is interoperability, right? How do you ensure that there is data privacy and sensitivity, right? Now, internet penetration is a problem in India, especially in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, right? And if I don't have internet, I won't be able to scan a QR code. So we don't realize that. So if you go to a shop, you switch off your internet and you try to scan a QR code, you won't be able to send money because the encoder needs internet. The encoder that encodes the QR code, right? So how will this happen? How will that problem be solved? Uh, what will happen to the batteries that are already there in the market? Right? How do you manage that? Finally, how will you manage global suppliers who are not willing to share a lot of data, right? So and we didn't stop there. We kind of sort of asked these people, do you see any kind of solutions to these kind of problems? So yeah, so there is a sort of list of solutions that the entire group of the stakeholders that are part of these discussions came up with. Finally, we have collated all of that findings, the research, everything into a report. Uh, and this report is now live on Battery 360's website. I highly encourage all of you. I'll take 2 seconds here to request all of you to scan the QR code. The link will also be shared um, and in the chat. So please do scan, get a hold of the report, and we are open to feedbacks. Please do share your feedbacks. Moving on, so this is what the 360 working group has done. The another focus area that we have been working on is on the technology aspect, right? And we believe that Battery Aadhaar has this golden opportunity of replicating the success that India has already seen. So one of the most important technology exports out of India has been UPI, Aadhaar, right? So what does this essentially mean? What do you mean by digital public infrastructure? Essentially, it means the technology that is minimalistic, that is the government sort of has. Sorry for this. So the government, there is minimal involvement from the government, right? The system that is defined is interoperable. The system is designed in a way that there is no sort of crowding out by the big technology service providers. technology service providers. For example, there's a network effect, right? If I onboard, say, some of the big OEMs and a smaller OEM wants to get access to that network, it will be forced to sort of come into my network so that it has access to all of these bigger OEMs. Now, this can prove to be expensive for them. I may demand a larger fee. I may demand that smaller player to sort of subscribe to some of the other value-added services and so on and so forth. So this is what a DPI looks like, right? And one of the core elements is also decentralized and federated data, which essentially means that I am in control of my own data, right? So one second, I'm continuously getting this. Ananta, am I still audible and visible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay. So, and one of the examples that we have in India, which is one of the most successful exports, is like UPI, right? So, if you deep, for most of us, just end up using UPI, and the 80 crore transactions happen every day on UPI. 80 crore transactions. So how is it that I can scan any of the QR code using, say, an ICICI app and it gets transferred to an HDFC account? How does this happen? It is because these protocols have been standardized. The way the system identifies me, the way the system identifies where my account is, it's all standardized, right? This is a classic example of how DPI has been scaled and has been successful in India. And we believe that this is a golden opportunity for a very sector specific DPI to come in. DPI brings in a host of benefits. The integration cost stays flat because the protocols are standardized. The interoperability is not a problem, right? If tomorrow I want to add a new system onto it, like say integration with CPCB or integration with MOFCC, because the protocols are standardized, the integration into the Aadhaar system becomes very easy. And because this data is universally accessible, I start trusting the data more, right? Against versus if the data is only visible to you and it's a protected data, I won't trust that data. I will have to set up again my own systems to measure the parameters, and the trust won't be established in the system, right? This can fit into, so basically you have a BPAN QR code, there is a central server, the data flows in through sort of, APIs, the access is regulated. So this is how the DPI can fit into the Aadhaar framework, right? One of the biggest value propositions is UPI helps in bringing down the technology cost, right? Uh, Finally, one of the last things that I would like to bring your attention to is that battery Aadhaar is going to be an extremely complex concept because we see that this is being brought in by mods. So EV batteries are regulated by mods. The battery waste management is managed by MOFCC. Industrial batteries are managed by Ministry of Power. APIs are managed by Ministry of IT. Um, there are hosts. There are a lot of critical stakeholders like the CPCV, the BIS, ARAI, Ministry of Commerce, DST. So it's going to be an extremely complex governance structure. It will be interesting to see how this ecosystem develops. Our focus areas will be to extend the consultations to the energy sector, try to understand what their pain points are, understand how the DPI architecture can be built for Battery Aadhaar, and finally test the architecture and also the use cases using pilots for the validation. So this is what I had to share. I believe that this is a golden opportunity to use DPI to build a circular battery economy and eventually lead to a self-sustaining, reliant, and a resilient domestic battery ecosystem for India. Thank you. That's all I had to share. So, Dr. Praveen, if you can come in and Anand, anything else, or we can sort of start taking the questions?
Yeah. Please go ahead. We have one attendee who has his hand raised, but I think let's answer the questions we have received in the chat, and then we can proceed. Yeah.
So thanks, Anubhav, for the presentation. And the majority of the questions we have received a lot of questions, but majority of the questions are around the implementation challenges, like how this number will be assigned at the whether at the pack level and how the cells will be mapped, because in the battery packs we have multiple cells. So what will have how these cells will be mapped with the battery pack, and there is a lot of question around the governance related to the battery Aadhaar data, and a large number of questions were available are around how the data will be collected and the ownership of this data and how reliable this data will be, because this data will be collected by the different OEMs, and each one will be having their own way of doing, and these battery packs, they'll be collecting data through the BMS, the SOH algorithm, and how you standardize this. So all these challenges and aspects you have already covered in your presentation and as well as in the scope report. And there was one question around whether this will be a mandatory. So currently this whole battery Aadhaar idea is evolving, and as Anubhav has mentioned, that there is a draft document from the Morth on this. And Anubhav, it will be as you mentioned, like the if the number is assigned to the battery pack, so how this number will be mapped with the cells, or is this only will be assigned to the container?
So what I believe is right now, as we are seeing the system evolve, it is restricted to battery pack. Because the moment we get into the cells, a lot of challenges do come in. And I think it is also important to take this in a phased manner. The complexities are enormous. So I think it's a very strategic and a right approach to start with the pack level, and then probably over the years, as the system evolves, as the ecosystem evolves, as the IT system evolves, as the trust in the system evolves, as the data exchange gets streamlined between global suppliers, the end consumers, um, uh, all of this as the system evolves, I think at this stage, at that stage, probably it'll get into a cell level data, because one of the most important things is to also understand the cost aspect of it. So the moment we sort of start getting into a cell level, we need to see how the cost also escalates for the technology, right? For the data storage. So you multiply, understand number of cells in the battery pack, you multiply with the number of batteries that the OEM manages, so the amount of management, data management it needs to do. So yeah, so I think it will go on a phased manner. Right now, it is at battery pack level.
And also, currently our lithium battery market is import dependent, so a lot of upstream data is not available at the OEM level also. And we need to develop a system which is more customized for India, because the kind of supply chain status is there, and the data we generate, as you mentioned, that if you collect the data like in European Union battery passport, they are collecting more than 100 data attributes, and this collection of this data comes with collection, storage, and processing comes with the cost. So we have to, as in the report also you have mentioned, that we need to categorize the mandatory and optional data, and also we need to look into that what kind of static and dynamic data we need, and whether we can deploy some kind of advanced technology solution to process a lot of data generated by the battery and store a few critical data that can help us in making the decisions. So both at the implementation level, governance level, as well as at the data collection and data management level, things need to
Yeah.
evolve, and a lot of discussion and understanding will be required. The government is also doing a lot of consultation and discussion in this direction, because as you need to develop a system which is more interoperable at the global level, because you want to have the business across the different countries. So one of the question is there, like, are there synergy with the DPP movement happening in EU, and India's focus on LCA is increasing, and the DPI
Yeah,
develop can also work well with the DPP like models for other sectors, building material, packaging,
yeah,
textile, etc.
yeah.
So this is the one question
So,
shared by the one of the participants.
so essentially, Battery Aadhaar is a DPP only, the digital product passport only. And like Europe, like Europe, India has also started with, it isn't officially calling it a DPP, but essentially it is a DPP, it's a digital product passport. Uh, and I think the government has, in its latest draft also released by ARI, it has acknowledged that harmonization with the global frameworks needs to happen. So it is a process. It has been noted, taken note of. The harmonization will happen with the global frameworks. Uh, I know that in Europe, the DPP has been scaled to many use cases. There's a vehicle passport coming in. There is passports coming in. The chemical industry, I know, just as Catena X is an industry association for battery passports. Similarly, there have been many X's that have now come up in Europe for the chemical industry, for the textile industry, for the iron and steel industry. A lot of DPP's development is happening. I think once Aadhaar takes shape, and I know also for a fact that Indian government is also exploring DPPs for other sectors as well. So it is a system that is developing in India, and it'll develop with its own pace because it's a very complex concept. Integration of supply chain, especially when the supply chain is globalized, it is an extremely difficult concept, but it is happening in India in short.
Yes. So another question is there around is like how can OEMs maintain the database after being refurbished by the third party? Many specs may change. Like when we talk about the second life batteries, because now we are
Yeah,
talking about integrating the circularity with the LIB supply chain, and the circularity we have two major routes. As you mentioned in
yeah.
your presentation, also we can reuse these batteries, and in reuse aspect we have either we can refurbish or repurpose or manufacture these batteries. And in this condition lot of specs changes, like in remanufacturing you will be collecting different good cells and making a new pack. So how this whole battery Aadhaar concept will play role, how it will change when you are going for refurbishing, especially related to the ownership of the battery pack, because in
So
the
I think it
battery waste
is.
management
Hmm,
rule EPR,
yeah,
the ownership when you buy the battery pack, or the OEMs will be the producers. But how this
yeah.
changes when it is going into the third party hand?
I think this has been very clearly sort of laid down, where if it is a refurbished product, it a new BPAN is generated, a new battery passport number or a battery pack Aadhaar number is generated, and whoever is refurbishing the battery becomes the new owner of the battery Aadhaar system. And I think the only data that will be from a life cycle traceability perspective is that the previous battery Aadhaar numbers, the status gets updated, but the maintenance of the new cycle of the battery Aadhaar lies completely with the one who is refurbishing the battery and basically selling the product under its own name. So they become the new producer. So the entire responsibility shifts there. So I think that's very clearly laid down. The responsibility shifts. The original people are not responsible anymore.
And even the second life battery market is evolving, and lot of pilots are happening. So the standards and the testing and certificate in aspect is also evolving. So another question there, are there opportunity for startups to become a service provider of developing battery Aadhaar for battery companies?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I don't
So
think
this is
there
more
is.
related to the business that comes out with the battery Aadhaar. So as battery Aadhaar, this concept is evolving. Anubhav, you can continue.
Yeah. So see, the entire idea of having this, it nowhere restricts who can provide the battery Aadhaar services. Because okay, let me take the example of Europe, where it is a slightly more mature system because it's been a couple of years there since this concept has been developing. So see, the value really of a system like a DPP really depends on what is the value that you're providing. The problem here is everybody is looking at battery Aadhaar or a battery passport as a cost head. But I think it's a wrong perspective to look at. The moment you see what's the value that's being offered, that's when you start seeing, okay, it's not just a cost head, but it's actually an operational efficiency system that it is bringing. And that value proposition is what technology service provider can bring in. For example, onboarding into a battery Aadhaar system. So one of the services that the European technology service providers are providing is ensuring the entire supply chain data coming onto the battery Aadhaar, right? So that's the kind of services. Creation of the digital twin, data analytics. So all of these services anybody can provide based on data. I don't think there's any restriction on who can provide these services.
And there is a question around how if somebody want to participate in the discussion as you are discussing during the scope work.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to participate in your future discussion, can you share more about the working group you have mentioned in your presentation?
Yeah, sure. So it's a open working group. There's no membership fee. There is nothing. Battle 360 is a completely open platform. What we can do is probably I can drop in my email and do reach out to me. And you can, for a one-to-one conversation, please do. We'll be happy to host you at our office here in Delhi, at our Hoskas office. Our office is in Hoskas / Green Park. So we'll be happy to host you there, have this conversation. If you need a one-to-one conversation, we can share our learnings, we can share our insights. And for working group, please do reach out to me, and we'll see how this is how we can take that forward. So I'll drop in my contact, and you can reach out to me, and then we'll see how we can take it forward.
And as this in last 2 year, we have done a lot of interaction with the subject matter experts as well as the startup and industry. And as the presentation, you saw that this is a very complex topic to handle, and we need to move carefully so that we are able to develop some solution which is going to help each of the stakeholder attached with this whole ecosystem. So, a lot of insights we have shared in the publications that Anubhav has mentioned during the presentation, starting from the conference proceeding related to data management expert note and the latest this scope report, which talks about the possible use cases and the challenges associated with that, and the benefits, of course, with the battery Aadhaar. So you can go through this scope report, and we'll be happy to connect in this work through this working group as well as one-to-one conversation to share and learn more on this.
Yeah. So I see a lot of interesting questions in the chat. We are running out of time, I know. So quickly, SOH, there's a question SOH, just to lay it out there. Uh, uh, there is a group working, BIS is working on standardization of SOH. So we might soon see actually a standard on SOH, and also SOH is a dynamic data. So probably as the guidelines evolve, there will be a sort of clear laid down rule on how frequent the data updation needs to happen. So it will be a credible SOH data based on a standard, and it will be sort of how that will happen will come out eventually with the guidelines. And yes, it is going to be on a central government server. The question says who should control access for players like financials, recyclers, and second life operators? Well, the access control will come out in the guideline only to who can access what kind of data. So this it's not the government which is going to decide. The government is only acting as a repository of dynamic data with the only intention of bringing down the cost of storage for smaller players. The government is not going to control the data. So that's there. And how the trust is going to be built. So it's a evolving system. There will be certification agencies, there will be auditing agencies that will play a role in building trust and credibility in the data of Battery Aadhaar. It is still an evolving system. These details will be sort of detailed out as the policy evolves. That's it. Back to you, Anandita.
Great. Thank you, Anubhav, for the great presentation. I hope everybody was. If you have further questions, please do reach out. And I have pasted the links of all the papers on the chat. We will be sending the recording of this video of this webinar within this week. Thank you, everyone.